on the Daily Drive. Property Fast Track with Charles Tarbey. Thanks to Century 21. Smarter, bolder, faster. Go to century21.com.au.
Now, Charles Tarbey, we need to update your status now. You are a legend. Tell us about your recent award.
Now, John, you weren't supposed to talk about this.
Come on, mate.
Look, I was very proudly awarded the Woodrow Waite Award, which is an institute award selected by the president of the institute to one person each year. And it's for contribution to the industry and to the institute. And I was I graciously accepted the award last Thursday? So, gosh, that time has flown so much.
It's been a whirlwind. The media have been calling you. You've been interviewed left, right and centre.
Absolutely crazy. And all these extra appearances now. But the lovely thing was that my children, my family, they were all there. They came along and I didn't know a bunch of people were coming along. I was told about the award, but I didn't say it to anybody. So somehow it got out through other sources and off it went. So very proud.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Charles Tarbey.
Is that a standing ovation or just...
Oh, yeah, I'm standing. Here we go.
Thank you. That's much better.
I'll stay seated, but you know I have respect.
Yes, you and I are the same height when you're sitting down, but when you stand up, boy, I'm challenged.
So here he is, a bloke who's got lots of experience. 13 12 83 if you'd like to talk to Charles Tarbey tonight about real estate, whether it be commercial or resi. Maybe you want to get into the property market now as an investor. 13 12 83.
Maybe you want to get out too.
Indeed, maybe you want to sell.
Lots of talk out there right now.
Tonight we'll have a look at living in a converted warehouse, a chat with Jonathan Richards coming up. He's a designer. I knew friends, mainly artistic people, photographers and painters and those sorts of folks who lived in warehouses years ago, but they were pretty drafty back then. But they've come a long way, so I'll have a look at that and also go around the ground. We'll have a look at a particular suburb of New South Wales tonight. And Tom Panos, it's always good to have him on board to check the national auction scene. But Charles, mega expensive houses. Will you have a look at this one? Kayley, take us through this.
Okay, well, and could another waterfront mansion enter the $70 million club here in Sydney? It's called Phoenix Acres and it's a prime waterfront mansion in the Sydney harbourside suburb of Vaucluse, Charles.
$70 million. Now, young Sam was asking me what sort of deposit you might need for that.
Yep.
I don't think there'd be a deposit inside. I think it might
It'll be cash only.
But I did say to him, what do you think the stamp duty is? So he's gone around and calculated it, and have a look at that.
Stamp duty on a $70 million home is $4.8 million.
So there'll be celebrations today, state government.
Yeah, look, if that sale has already started, the state government, big windfall for them.
Exactly.
So we should be finding out what they're going to do with that $4.8 million.
You could buy a bridge on an expressway for that.
It's an incredible amount of money in stamp duty for a process that takes a little bit of effort, but not $4.8 million worth of effort to process.
Yeah, exactly. And if it sells for over $70 million, it'll become only the third property to do so. James Packer's Vaucluse mansion sold for $70 million in 2015, and the Fairfax estate, known as Elaine, sold this year for $71 million.
Yeah, and my dear friend Mr. John Simon, he put his home on the market there at $100 million. They got somebody interested in it, but John decided to keep it. And although he's living some of his life overseas nowadays, he kept his Sydney home. But $100 million, apparently an offer came through. But I don't know whether John just felt, because he's not the sort of man that sells real estate, he's the sort of man that buys real estate.
He built that place himself, didn't he?
He did.
From
He
scratch,
paid a substantial amount for the block of land and probably about 10 times more to construct that property. I did say to him that we were on stage together once doing a talk at Bond University to the property students, and we talked about the housing issues in Sydney. I suggested that if he started off his house, he might be able to get around about, I think I calculated about 30 or 40 units out of it, and he might be able to help solve the housing crisis in Sydney. He gave me the filthiest look you've ever seen, but anyway.
So this place, it might be called Phoenix Acres, but it's not even an acre. 3,731 square metres, but it is waterfront. It's akin to a seaside resort. It's got a boathouse, as you'd hope, deep water jetty, probably comes with its own oysters, I would say, attached to the pontoons, a pool, tennis court, and even a traditional old English-style pub within. $70 million, Charles. I mean, this is for the dreamers. Who buys these places, these piles?
So I think it's just people who really have got money that at the end of the day they don't know what else to do with it. You've heard me say this before. I think that people who live in really large houses hate their families. And
Because you have to call them because the house is too big to walk from one side to the other.
An intercom service to get them, and sometimes you hope they don't answer. But I think properties like that are where you want to go on holidays to, not where you want to live.
Yeah. Do you think it's possibly would only attract offshore buyers?
I think it's owned by an offshore buyer already, so yeah, probably absolutely right. But there's some very wealthy people in Australia that we don't hear a lot about. There's quite a substantial amount of wealth that doesn't show up in the rich lists.
So there you go. Put that on your wish list, on your bucket list, a $70 million harbourside pad. If you can come up with a dough, good luck to you. But just note, you need $4.8 million to cover the stamp duty.
Just the stamp duty, yes.
Interesting stuff. Now, let's have a think about the other side of life. So there you go. $70 million harbourside pad versus living in a warehouse. Now, these days, they're pretty trendy. Conversions. Instantly, you conjure up images of hip, young, inner-city folks with their fixie bikes and MacBook Pros. Maybe it's New York, London, could be Melbourne, could be Sydney, could be Brisbane. Trendy folks in trendy places. But it turns out that warehouse conversions are exploding in popularity. Even for those who've got families, and who can blame them? Converted warehouses are desirable. They're architecturally interesting. Often there's plenty of history because they exist within an old building that may have been there for 100 years. And Jonathan Richards is a director and interior designer with SJB Architects. He's an expert in this space, and he even lives in one with his wife and 2 young kids. G'day, Jonathan.
Hi, how are you?
Going well, thank you.
That's good.
So typically, warehouse conversions are associated with younger buyers. I knew, as I said before, lots of artists who lived in them, before they even got converted. Is that still the case, or are the buyers now maybe a bit older?
Well, I think warehouse conversions used to be very popular for the young as well because it was more affordable. It was sort of the leftover spaces. And warehouses have now become very expensive. So it's still a popular realm for the young people, but it's less and less affordable. And it's now lending itself more to families and older people.
What are the benefits of living in a warehouse conversion?
Well, there's some of the benefits. There are a lot of benefits. There are some drawbacks as well. But one of the benefits are that they are typically old buildings, and they're buildings that have got lots of character and personality and a sort of patina that has aged over time. And when people are buying off the plan in cities like Sydney and Melbourne, and there are many, many developments and many options in that sphere, to find buildings that are old and have some sort of historic story to them is very appealing.
Jonathan, it was a big move many years ago with the conversions, as I saw it, warehouses, and people were stepping back and thinking, is this going to work? And as you said, a lot of young people got into it, and it's very popular, and it's really quite an interesting way to live. High ceilings, that most people are exposed to the 8-foot ceilings in apartments or even lower. So do you think it's popular to buy an established conversion, or would you recommend somebody undertake the entire project themselves?
Look, it is... Every development is a bit of a risk when you're undertaking it yourself. It can be. I think the great thing about warehouses is that they give an opportunity to create a different lifestyle, something that's unusual. So, and as you say, it's not particularly new. It's something that has been around for a long time, and the high ceilings and the light from the skylights of the warehouse, they're really great characteristics of a warehouse. We've been involved in a number of conversions of warehouses, and there are some really good ones out there. And if you can grab one and see one that's been done well and sort of retains the personality of the warehouse, I think that's a much easier way to go. But when you're doing it yourself, it really does give you the opportunity to tailor it for yourself and your own family if you have one, to make it your own and make it special, which is what warehouses have the opportunity of being.
There's a couple of things. You said that there are some setbacks, maybe some problems.
Yeah.
You've got a young family that you live in a warehouse in with.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you've got to be prepared to give up, especially when you're a young family living in a warehouse?
Yeah, so the obvious things are some of the things like sounds, just acoustics across the warehouse, noise and smells, and if you keep it too open, it has inherent problems potentially with not having your own private space, and adults not having their private space, and the kids being sort of too, not also having their own space as well, being too exposed. But then that again is one of the really appealing things about it, that you can almost build a room within the warehouse as well, that you're in a way constructing a house within a much bigger volume.
Jonathan, how do you? They come across to me as not cosy, as very cold.
Exactly.
And I'm just wondering, if you've got very high ceilings, how do you divide the rooms up? I mean, you would have open roofs, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. So the heating is also an issue. The tricky thing with warehouses are that if you start to try to circumvent all of these issues, you run the risk of losing the character of the warehouse that you wanted in the first place. So you sort of bring the ceilings down or clad too much of it or wrap those pipes that you could see and try to neaten it up. After a while, you're sort of building a plasterboard box within the warehouse and you've lost the soul of the original building. So it is, in a way, some of the characteristics of the building that you need to adapt and love and perhaps deal with these individual issues in different ways. So dropping suspended ceilings rather than creating a total room. There are clever ways of doing it, but I think for me a really important thing is that if you're going to take on a warehouse, that you don't get too precious about it, and you don't sort of wrap it in something else and lose what you bought it for or you're renovating it for.
All that open space is very good for practicing your internal golf putting, I would assume.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's also really good for music. You get great sound out of a tall ceiling. There's lots of there's great sort of fun to be had in a warehouse, but it's not for everyone. It's something that's great potentially to start with, but it's not always. It's not for everybody.
Do they hold their value?
Well, it depends where it is at the moment where you're buying them, but they are holding their value really well. Warehouses are highly sought after, particularly in areas. I live in Darlinghurst, particularly in areas like Darlinghurst and Pyrmont and these sort of inner city, sort of fringe city areas
in New South Wales.
In New South Wales, and they do hold their value because they are really sought after, and they do sort of capture a very unique part of the real estate market. So in that sense, they're very special, and there will usually and most often be really purchasers that are really keen on it.
And Jonathan, is it a similar scenario to living in an apartment complex where you've got to interact with a body corporate?
That depends a little bit on how they're planned out. So some of them, we have worked on a warehouse that was divided up, and everybody had a separate front door to the street. So they were effectively, we called them warehouse terraces. So there wasn't common area. Everybody had their own part of the building, and there was no shared space. So there was no body corporate in that sense. But when there is a common lobby and there are common, say, rooftop gardens or common facilities, yes, that's exactly right. It works exactly like a typical apartment building.
So if in that instance you described there is no common area and I'm assuming no need for a body corporate, but there's still the outer walls of the building and the roof, for example, that would need some administration. How does that happen?
There are shared, that's true. So there is a body corporate in that sense that there are the shared costs of the shell of the building and the roof itself. It is really just a maintenance body corporate rather than being typically like the ones that there are much bigger common facilities.
Couldn't they just hear each other though? Even though they've got separate doors, once you're within the building, can't they hear each other's stuff going on?
They can't. Well, they can, particularly when they go in the one that we were working on. There are balconies, so you can hear the spread of noise across the balconies. But the internal walls were very, very thick. And
okay.
They were for fire and also acoustics, and you couldn't hear a thing through them.
Well, fascinating stuff. Jonathan Richards, thanks for your time. A good insight into warehouse living conversion stuff. I quite like that idea. Thanks for your time tonight. Jonathan
that's a pleasure. Yeah.
See you, matey. He's with SJB Architects. And we're doing Property Fast Track tonight with Charles Tarbey.
Yeah, we're going to get to James, yes.
We're going to James. We're going to Ryde. He's around the grounds, and we're going to have a look at Century 21 at Ryde and find out what's great about Ryde.
And if you want to talk to Charles tonight, he's here to take your calls. As you learnt, he's a legend of the industry.
Yeah,
given that award a week ago,
very old.
13 12 83. I can call you leg end if you like, if you prefer that. 13 12 83. Charles Tarbey here to help you tonight with any real estate questions. There are some great advantages in being the world's largest real estate company. For a start, your Century 21 local office uses the best technology and knowledge base in the world. Combined with the fact that each office is independently owned and operated, your local Century 21 agent knows your city, your suburb, your town and your street. It also means Century 21 agents can offer a huge range of resources and experience, including information from over 300 offices around the country. It's no surprise Century 21 is the fastest growing real estate brand in Australia. Buying, selling or looking for a new home to rent? Contact your local Century 21 office and find out why they really are smarter, bolder, faster. Visit century21.com.au. 13 12 83. Charles Tarbey is here tonight from C21, taking your calls on all things real estate. We haven't done all 300 offices yet, but we're moving around the country, aren't we, Charles?
We're doing a pretty good job, actually. So I've got to try and pick one out. I remember one week we picked, I think it might have been in eastern suburbs and then Broken Hill.
Yep.
We did a complete contrast between the two.
We did, and I actually got a Facebook message from my cousin,
From your cousin
after that discussion.
Who's with First National
That's
in
it.
Broken Hill.
Because you like to share the love.
I do. First National's a great organisation, but not, they're...
But we're here to talk about Century 21.
We are.
So-
And that's where the median price in Broken Hill, I think they had properties for as low as $125,000. There was a gasp in the room and outside when we said that. So,
Now let's get a local area real estate snapshot. Time to go around the grounds. This time we're going to James Ward. He's from Century 21 in Ryde. G'day, James.
Hi, Kayley, Nick, Charles. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks very much for chatting to us, James. Just a bit of background for Ryde, of course, is a well-established, well, we can't call it a town, but a suburb. Used to be a town years ago. A suburb in Sydney that has got fantastic opportunity. Lots of apartment complexes gone up around that area. I started some real estate work in that area in my teens, so I worked in that particular spot. So when I thought about what we're going to do this week, I thought James and John, who got the business out, they're really striking, strong young real estate practitioners who are growing a fantastic business there, John. So James, the guys are going to ask you some questions.
Mate, so just tell us, how far out from the CBD are you?
K's as the crow flies, Nick.
20, did you say?
20 K's.
20 Ks. All right. So that's a bit of a golden belt, isn't it, for any CBD?
Anything within the 20 Ks from the city, very, very strong demand from buyers.
Okay. So tell us about that strong demand in 2017. What kind of spikes are you seeing from week to week? What are people to pay, at auctions, what are they paying above and over reserves for, say?
Oh, look, it really does vary depending on the agent and the demand on the day. But look, we have seen, as far as 100,000 over reserve, particularly earlier in 2017, some of those earlier months, demand was very strong carrying over from the previous year. Since then, we have seen levels diminish a little bit coming into spring, but we're seeing that perked up a little bit by first home buyers, which are likely picking up their numbers due to, some of those increasing government incentives.
James, there's a significant amount of development going on. You pop down Ryde Road, hit the bridge where all the water is, and on this side of the bridge, because on the other side of the bridge there's a significant amount of development, but on this side of the bridge there's an incredible amount of development that people don't even know. Most of that area used to be massive industrial area, and it's changed.
Absolutely. We've seen a huge amount of gentrification happening around the area of Meadowbank. A lot of these old warehouses in industrial state have been converted to what is high-rise apartments, which is fantastic to see because it's an area that's serviced by, plenty of transport. There's schools, childcare, ferries, and train lines. So it's good to see that, the planning's going into an area that can handle an increase in population and still get people around to where they need to be.
And it's got, because it's so established, a lot of California bungalow-type homes, doesn't it, James?
Yeah, we do see a few around, a lot of older homes. It's actually one of the oldest suburbs in Sydney. So with that in mind, we see a huge diverse range of property styles, going as far back as Federation.
It's got a significant infrastructure, and that's what I like about the shopping facilities and so on. You've got the M2 north of you, you've got the M4 south of you. It's really quite an interesting place where you can just get straight on Victoria Road for those that know Sydney, and you're in the city in about 15, 20 minutes.
Well, James Ward, thank you for your time from Century 21 Ryde in New South Wales. Let's talk to Tom Panos now.
James.
He's here every week, an auctioneer and a 2-decade veteran of the biz. G'day, Tom.
Hello, how you going?
Mate, we're good. Melbourne's had another ripper weekend. Strong clearance rates of 76%. More than $500 million worth of property sold. Is that right? 500 mil? Did I get that correct? Is that half a bill?
Well, there was
Yes.
there were 1,208 auctions, so
Right.
I guess we're going to get pretty close. Where are we? At 1,208. It could even be more than that, Nick.
All right, certainly it is clear. $500 million worth of property sold. Standout capital city, I would have said this weekend. Is that right, Tom?
It was, and Canberra wasn't that far behind at 74.5, with obviously a lot less properties, Nick. So, Melbourne has continued going strong, but I'm talking to a lot of the real estate agents there in Melbourne, and I'd like to get Charles's feedback on that. And Melbourne at the moment, like if you're talking about 50 or 60 k's out of the city, things are more challenging than what they are probably closer in. So we're seeing two parts of Melbourne emerge. Some parts of Melbourne are getting 50% clearance rates, and some parts of Melbourne are getting 80% clearance rate. So it is being averaged out.
There is a price change coming in through Melbourne too. It did have price growth in the last quarter and last month, Tom, but that price growth has slowed. It was 0.7% in growth, whereas this entire 12 months previously was up over or close to 14. So the growth has slowed down, and the agents are saying it's, again, a little bit tougher like Sydney, because Sydney had a clearance rate of 69.5% with 916 auctions, which is really still very, very strong. So both capital cities are still trending well, but the price movement is changing and it's moving in a downward trend.
Yeah, and the other thing, Charles, that's happening at the moment, and then is that by Thursday, when we're getting the results come in for the what we call the uncollectibles that you don't get on the day, we are getting a number. Like last week, the Sydney number was 64% by Thursday. So I'm keeping my eye on the Thursday number as well, because agents have got a tendency to not report all numbers by the time that we're getting our reports on the Saturday.
Well, as you know, when the market slows down, gets a bit tough, sometimes we don't want to talk about the results. And so some agents that were talking up their performance maybe 6 to 12 months ago are a little bit quieter now, Tom.
Well, as I said to one agent, I said to him, I rang him up on Sunday. I said, have you been able to wrap up that sale? He said to me, I'm working on it. And then I rang him up today and I said, how's it going? He says, well, it's still being worked on, Tom.
He said, Tom, I'm doing overtime. Do you notice any problems, Tom, with underquoting?
Look, Melbourne's probably had the most action taken on agents than any other place.
Yeah.
And I think that you might find out that there's more to come out of that, because I'll keep making references to, look, how about, all I'll say is that in Victoria, they've been pretty aggressive on certain agents. In Sydney at the moment, look, Sydney's had these quoting rules, Nick, for now. We're in the second year, and the world has sort of adjusted, and agents have learned to cope with the new world. It's actually not being too problematic, more so in Melbourne. But at the moment, I don't think you're getting a problem with properties going for too crazy prices in Sydney, because the market's not allowing it to happen as it used to be anyway.
What about Brisbane? How's Brisbane performing?
Okay, so Brisbane it's not a strong auction market, Kayley, generally speaking. But I look at the numbers here, and they had a 50% clearance rate on 170 properties that went to auction, and that's a good number because in previous weeks they were hanging around the 40s, 41, 42, 43. So 50% is good. There is a lot of talk. In Brisbane that there's an oversupply of apartments, particularly closer into the city. So I think buyers are getting a little bit sceptical with units in that area.
It's been a popular subject. Interestingly enough, Tom, Sydney, Melbourne and Canberra didn't perform as well as this time last year, but Brisbane, Adelaide and Perth performed better than this time last year in auctions. So there is a shift one way in those other three capital cities and a shift the other way in the three majors we've been talking about.
Yeah, Charles, I actually am calling it here. I think that Perth may have hit rock bottom, and we're beginning to look at it move up again. I think Perth is got. I think Perth's going to be a lot better than what people think it will be.
Well, Tom Panos, always great to have your insights tonight. You and Charles are on Sky Business News this evening, I believe.
Not tonight. Charles is.
Not tonight.
Oh, you're not there, Tom. All right.
I'm in Geelong, so I can't get to a TV studio. And I'm here with agents, and all the agents are saying Geelong's a great place to follow a footy team and buy real estate.
Oh, there you go. Well, listen.
Good on you, Charles. Thank you. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thank you very much,
Charles
Kayley.
Tarbey
Thanks,
from
Tom.
Century 21 there.